Welcome to Play by Players, an MLSPA podcast. Now here's your host, former MLS player, Bobby Boswell.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Play by Players. Today I'm joined by one of my old teammates, not just a teammate, a guy I call a friend. I'm not so sure that he calls me a friend, but that's okay. He is an Armenian American soccer wonder child. That's the word I've come up with for him. He had highlight reels in terms of goals scored. It'll challenge that one against anyone's highlight reel in the world, including the greats. Half of his goals usually involve someone on the field yelling, "Don't shoot that!" And he still did it, but it led to over 34 goals in MLS. He gave goalies nightmares. He's hated by the jersey kitmen. They had to put his name on the back of the jerseys. He's responsible for the death of more turkeys than the Pilgrims. Please welcome to the podcast, Alecko Eskandarian.
Wow. I can definitely say I've never gotten an intro like that ever before in my life. So thank you very much, Sir Bobby Boswell.
Well, hey man, how you doing? You look great. I haven't gotten to see you in a long time, but how's everything going?
Everything's good, man. Obviously, we got hit pretty hard here in New York with the pandemic and a whole host of other things. So I'm just trying to maintain as much as we can during these hard times. But I honestly can't complain, man. Family's healthy, so everything is good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm great. I'm better now that you're here. And I have to preface before we start with the line of questioning, I have to tell a story about Alecko. This is my favorite Alecko story to tell anybody because Alecko has got, if you were to describe his goals on the field, you wouldn't believe them unless you saw them. And some of his stories off the field, you would say there's no way any of this stuff is true. And, a lot of people will reference the Kim Kardashian date and they'll say there's no way that an MLS player went on a date with Kim Kardashian. But my favorite Alecko story was one day we were at a bar near his house and I decided I was going to go home. He said, I think I'm just going to hang out a little while longer, finish my drink, go up to my apartment. And next day at practice, I said, how'd it go? And he said, you won't believe what happened. A supermodel came in after you left and we started talking and, had a drink or whatever. And then I got her number and we're like going on a date now. And it's like, you are so full of crap. Like, there's no need to lie to me. I'm still your buddy. And then like a couple days later, I see in the newspaper, it was Alecko and some actual supermodel in town. She was there for some conference or fashion week or something. And there he is. So I was a compulsive liar when we'd go out and drink. I think you were too sometimes to have fun. But all the stories that I'm going to tell you today about Alecko are 100% true, regardless of whether you want to believe them or not. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I'll take your word for it, man. A lot of the times we spent together were a blur because, we were probably just dehydrated. But yeah, man, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, well, let's before we go, down some of those dehydrated stories, let's take it back to the beginning. Alecko, for those that don't know, he's talking about New York, but he is Jersey proud, born in New Jersey. He's got the Jersey attitude. Talk to me a little bit about growing up and I know you got deep Armenian roots, but also I feel like Jersey gives you also a little bit of a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, for sure. Really, really proud to be from Jersey. To be an Armenian from Jersey. It was a unique experience, but I think what makes New Jersey so great in my eyes is that it's a melting pot. And I grew up very much with a mentality of, you take pride in where you're from. Meaning your background, your ethnicity. So even my club teams growing up, you had like the Jamaican guys, the Colombian guys, the Peruvian guys, the Italian guys. And it was all like based on like how the country, like the national team was doing or some of the top club teams and things like that. So for me, I was kind of like, damn, there aren't any like great Armenian teams and like the national team wasn't good. So I had an uphill battle in every single argument. So one, I learned how to take criticism because that's what got thrown my way. And two, I learned how to stick up for myself and defend myself. And the beauty of it was, we all had so much pride in our different backgrounds and ethnicities, but we all then came together to be we're all from Jersey, and it's kind of like Jersey against the world type of mentality. But yeah, there was a lot of great lessons learned in Jersey that it wasn't until later in life when I was exposed to other parts of the country that I'm like, oh, you can't get away with that in Jersey, or that wouldn't fly in Jersey. But you just start to learn about the culture. So I think all of us from Jersey, from that pocket, are really proud of where we're from.
Well, I've had a lot of California kids on this podcast, and they brag about California being the best soccer state of all. I mean, looking at some of the guys that have come out of Jersey, I would put those names, maybe not a complete team, but the in terms of individual talent, I mean, Jersey's got to be up there as probably one of the best soccer producing states in the country. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's no question. It's not even a debate in my mind, especially when you think about how small Jersey is and you're comparing it to the entire state of California. Like it's pretty insane how there's so many players that have made it from Jersey. And I think the first thing you think about is just grit too. Like you got to go through some stuff in order to make it when you're coming out of Jersey. And there are things that, for me were normal, but like I said, when I go around the country and watch other players or learn the stories of other teammates, you start to realize like maybe it's not normal to get into like fist fights at 14, like on the soccer field. But for us, that was just how it would work.
Yeah. Well, he's talking about fist fights. This guy is he's loyal to Jersey. He's loyal to his teams. He's a glutton for pain. The Mets, the Jets, the Nets, and Arsenal, just 4 horrible teams that he supports. But let's not get into sports outside of soccer. Let's talk a little bit about your dad, probably your first coach, your first role model, still your role model. Played on, what I would consider the best team in the world, given the time. The old Cosmo teams had the best players in the world, and he was a member of that. Talk to me a little bit about growing up, having a father that was so successful, as a player.
Yeah, truly blessed to have my dad as a mentor and kind of teach me everything I knew about the game and relate it back to life lessons. So for me, when I was growing up, I have an older brother, and my older brother is like a saint. Like I was in such a shadow growing up because this guy literally did nothing wrong and followed every rules, listened, great manners, everything. And I was the opposite, where I was like speaking out of turn, wasn't always listening, didn't follow instructions. So at home, I was always kind of second fiddle to my brother. And it's natural for kids to like fight for their parents' attention, but I was always second best, like always like the bad kid. And it started out soccer for me just as a way to like vent and like get my frustration out and just like express myself, and usually like ended with me like fighting my brother, right? And it was funny that like as I started to get older and had some relative success at a young age, now you had like parents of my teammates who were like, great job, Alecko, you're doing really good, really good. And I was like, oh, this is what love feels like. Like, oh, this is new. And it was like funny because I had like 2 lives, right? Like at home, and the thing was that my parents were trying to teach me, it doesn't matter how good you are at soccer, like you have to get your crap together off the field. And eventually there was a nice marriage to it where, my dad, one of the best lessons he taught me was if you have any plans of being a soccer player, a good soccer player, first you have to be a good person, because at the end of the day, if no one likes you, then no one's going to pass you the ball. Like you break it down to simple terms, but it really makes sense where you're like, man, and we've all been there, Bobby, right? If you have that one guy on your team that's selfish, making excuses, not working for the teammates, you're going to think twice when it comes time to help him out, right? If they don't have your back. So I started to kind of like correlate the two, and I was like, all right, I want to be the same, the way I want to be known on the field is the same way I want to be known off the field as well. And it just helped me kind of put everything together, but definitely in debt to my dad for kind of teaching me those life lessons.
Yeah. And his dad, for those that don't know, was a international player as well, went to a World Cup, I think in Argentina. And he was a defender, which this generation, they don't associate Eskandarian with defense. but they do associate it maybe with yellow card, occasional red card. So you're keeping some of the family tradition alive. Your family also owned a soccer store. Is that right? I mean, when we say soccer is your life, that's as true as of a statement as we can make, right?
Yeah, not just me, like my entire family. Like we are soccer family through and through. My older brother played all the way through college at Villanova, and she goes unnoticed at times. My mom is like El Jefe. She's like the boss because she watches more games than anyone that I know, gives me breaking news, even though like I work in soccer, finds out stuff that I don't know about, and is somehow like also the most critical out of all of us of like, oh, that guy's got to finish that better, or the coach got these tactics wrong. And she's been kind of behind the scenes, the puppeteer behind it all.
All right, and for those that don't know, the turkey reference in the intro was to Alecko's love for turkey sandwiches. His mom apparently makes the best turkey sandwich in the United States. So shout out to your mom on that one. Let's talk about you talked about having some success, when getting, you play well at club or with your friends, and the parents would say you do well. Then you go to a pretty important school in terms of sports. And is it Bergen Catholic? Did I get that right?
That's right. I
mean, see, where I come from, high school soccer is horrible. But where you come from, apparently it can get you to become the Gatorade Player of the Year, not soccer player of New Jersey or anything like the Gatorade Player Athlete of the Year. I think in 2000.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about being an All-American in high school. I don't know what that's like, so I wouldn't know anything about it.
It's funny, Bob, because my school was not very good at soccer, and I started out. My brother is 3 years older than me. So I started out as just a ball boy watching my brother play in high school. And so when I was in 7th grade, 8th grade, my brother was on varsity, and I would watch and I'm like, I think I'm better than some of these guys, or I think, maybe in a year or two I can try to compete. But when I got to school, there was Bergen Catholic's like a very big athlete school, and not known for soccer, but football team was always like top 10 in the country. Basketball is always really good. Wrestling team's always top 10 in the country. Just amazing athletes all around. Soccer was like low on the totem pole. But when I got there, I had all these aspirations to play as a freshman. And they were like, oh, it's a school rule. No freshman can play in varsity. And I was like, oh, this is a bummer. So played with the freshman team. But my older brother was like my ride to school. So I would have to practice with the freshman team and then sit on the side and watch my brother practice so then he could give me a ride home. So I was doing well with the freshman team, and I was pretty frustrated because it was not a great level. And I knew I could easily play with the varsity team, but they just had this stupid rule. So one day at training, it's probably like 2 weeks into the season, kid goes down with an injury, and they just need an extra player for training. And they're like, I still had like my boots on. So they're like, hey, do you want to just like jump in? We're just doing like inter squad. I was like, okay. In my head, I was like, this is my chance. So went in there, and I think I scored like 4 goals in like a half. And the coach pulled me aside and he's like, all right, we'll try to change the rule. So they changed the rule, and I was the only freshman that played varsity in my high school. So everyone in the high school started buzzing, like, who is this kid? Does he even speak English? He has a weird name. Like, where'd he come from? Definitely not born here. And I was really quiet. I didn't say a word. And because I played varsity, I didn't really have too many friends anymore, like that were freshmen. So it's like this whole weird thing. But anyway, that started my career. And like I said, we were not great. We didn't win states or anything like that. But that was like my goal by senior year. I was like, I can't leave. Like everything I've accomplished, all the goals I've scored, like I can't leave without winning something. So my senior year, I was lucky that we had an awesome group of players, and we just came together and tore it up and won everything. I scored a ton of goals, and the accolades kind of came with that.
Yeah, and for the record, the Bergen Catholic, I went on their website because they have one, and they have 3 words that they really focus on. One of them is gentleman. And I looked at the numbers. You scored 154 goals in your time there. You scored 66 in your senior year. There's nothing gentlemanly about scoring 66 goals in high school. Like, you ripped kids apart in high school.
Yes, but they made a rule that I could not score more than 5 goals in a match. And here's the crazy thing. So then I would make a game out of it and be like, how quickly can I get 5? Because when I scored 5, then I would play goalkeeper. So it was like a game for me to be like, how quickly can I get 5? But the best was we played a rival, and it was we were up 5-4. And I like looked to the sideline like, what do you want me to do? Like, if they tie it up, or we just
we're gonna let them tie it up, yeah.
And Chris like, this game it's allowed. This game it's allowed. I'm like, okay. Thankfully, it ended up 5-4, but yeah. So I never scored more than 5, and I ended up having like 6 shutouts at goalkeeper. So it was pretty sweet.
No, I'm not buying that, but I'll give you the goals. Did you? And I know you've had a pretty extensive youth national career. Did you start? Was it in high school that you started playing?
Sort of, man. So it's important to say this, Bob, because I did really well in high school and like kind of got accolades locally and all that stuff. But with my club team that I played for, which was an amazing club team, like I said, all kids from different backgrounds. And I think like 5 kids from my club team ended up being pros. We also were like a very poor club team, like t-shirts as jerseys, didn't have any funding or budget to like go to any fancy tournaments. I never even been to a state cup final, let alone like winning states and going to regionals or anything like that. So we were very much like bad news bears. Like, we had kids showing up in taxi cabs at halftime, like just like, oh, sorry, I'm late. And you're like, what? So it was kind of this like weird thing where we were like very well known in Bergen County in North Jersey, but outside of that, we weren't exposed to like top players around the country. When I was 14, I played in a game, and a kid on the other team was like, hey, I think you're really good. I think you should try out for ODP. And I'm like, what's ODP? I had no idea. And they kind of, the kid's dad like hooked up with my dad, and they invited me to ODP tryouts. I went, and I had a huge mental block of like, wait a minute, I'm really comfortable with my friends and like playing in my bubble, but like, I don't think I'm one of the best players in the state. Like, I didn't even think that way. So when I tried out for the state team, my first year ODP, I played like 1 touch only. Like, I was just like, hot potato, like, give it to me, I'll give it back to you, no problem. Like, I didn't even want the ball. I didn't even want to be there. And I just had this whole like confidence thing that I was like, I don't view myself as being one of these guys. And all these kids were like, my club has won state championship 4 years in a row, and I was in the national team pool and this and that. And I'm like, nothing. And so my first year at ODP, I was playing like left back only because I was left footed. I didn't even start. And I was just honestly going through the motions. And state team practices are in Trenton, New Jersey, which is 2 hours from where I live all the way up north. So my poor dad had to like get off work, drive 2 hours there, 2 hours back. I'd get home at like 10 p.m., homework in the car, like dinner, like pre-made sandwiches in the car, like this huge sacrifice. And my dad every day would be like, what are you doing? Like, I don't even recognize who you are out there. And thankfully, you know, we stayed at it. And the next year, my dad kind of gave me an ultimatum of like, I'm not making this trip if this is how you're going to like play and, you know, just like, you know, play so simple and 1 touch and like tell the coach you're an attacker, for Christ's sake, you know? So finally that next year I was like, okay. And I kind of started being like, I don't care anymore, and started asserting myself. And then it wasn't until my senior year that finally I got some exposure nationally, where they invited me into the U17 national team. But by that time, when I got called in, the head coach at the time was John Ellinger. And the U17 national team was stacked. Landon, Beasley, Bobby Convey, Gooch, like Alex Yee, all these guys that were amazing. And when I got called in, they had already been in residency for like 2 years. So coach was like, hey, you did a lot better than we expected, but I can't tell these kids that have sacrificed 2 years of their lives that they're going to miss the U17 World Cup to like a new kid. So I got cut. I got cut from the U17 national team. And as if I didn't have enough of a chip on my shoulder, that was the final kind of dagger that I was like, okay, nothing is promised. And, if they don't let you in the door, then break the door down.
Okay. Well, that sets you up perfectly to go to University of Virginia. You go there, you're there 3 seasons, you score a ton of goals there. I think it's 50 goals in 60 games. I'm not sure what happened in 10 of those games, but but that's an unbelievable record. I think you're the rookie. You hold the record for rookies scoring goals, and then I also believe your junior year you scored, I think, 25, which is, I don't know if anyone's broken that since then. But talk to me a little bit about your time at Virginia.
Yeah, so kind of continue off where we left off. Because I didn't make that U17 national team, it's funny how like recruiting worked back then, right? And especially if you're on a small club like I was, I got full rides to every school in the tri-state area and then nothing outside of that. So I had like Rutgers, St. John's, UConn, Princeton, like those were the schools that were really recruiting me. But I didn't even get a single letter from an ACC school or anything like that. And silver lining, when I missed the under-17 World Cup, because I did well in the few camps that I was called in, they were like, hey, you're not going to the U17 World Cup, but the older age group regional team, Eastern regional team, is going on a trip to Germany. So they invited me to that. So I went there. Fortunately, the coach of that team was the assistant coach at UVA. His name is Craig Reynolds. So he saw me there. I did really well. And this is, mind you, this is already my senior year. Like nowadays, kids by like sophomore year know where they're going to go and everything. So this is my senior year, the start of my senior year. And he pulled me aside and he's like, hey, have you committed anywhere yet? And I said, I haven't committed, but my plan is to go to Princeton because I had like an academic grant to go there. I know that's another unbelievable story, right?
Yeah. That's less believable than going on a date with Kim Kardashian.
I think my parents have trouble believing that one too. But my plan was to go to Princeton, and then the coach was like, "Look, I think we need to bring you in, give us a chance to like give you a pitch." So they came to my house, and they're like, "Look, we've spent all of our scholarship money, but we can offer you 15% your freshman year, but you're most likely going to have to redshirt." So it was a tough conversation with my parents because it went from like full ride to now like a pretty big financial burden out of state at UVA. So I made a deal with my parents, give me 1 semester. I just want to see if I can measure up. Like so many great players at UVA, like Kyle Martino was just the rookie of the year there the year before. You had Marshall Leonard, Steve Totten, like all these great guys, Matt Oliver. So I went in with the mindset of like, I have 1 semester to just see if I belong. And if not, I'm going to transfer to Princeton and maybe like not even play soccer, And I went in that first semester and the coach, we had 2 starting forwards returning from the year prior. So the coach is like, look, no pressure, but you're probably gonna have to redshirt. And I was just like, I got to go for it. So from there, preseason, did my thing and they gave me a shot. And the rest was history after that. And I'll never forget at the end of the semester, I broke the school record. And when I went into the postseason like meeting with the coach, he was like, you had an amazing year and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, like, I'm really sorry, but I have to let you know that I'm transferring. And he's like, what do you mean? What do you mean you're transferring? And he's like, you just broke the school record and all this stuff. And I was like, and like the Jersey in me, I was like, look, I made a deal with my parents that unless I had a full ride, I can't stay here. And he was like, no. Okay, you have a full ride from here on out. So that took care of my scholarship. And then, I stayed for 2 more seasons.
Well, you kind of won everything you could win there in terms of accolades. You were the ACC Rookie of the Year, 3-time All-American. Won the Herman Trophy for the best college soccer player in the country. An ACC Player of the Year. That's just as impressive in my opinion, just because of how talented the ACC is. And you were Soccer America College Player of the Year, so you got to be in a magazine, which is always good.
That was cool. We all grew up looking at that magazine, so that was a pretty big deal.
I used to cut the magazine stuff out, and I probably read about you in that magazine and was like, wow, that guy's really talented.
You know what's funny, Bobby, though, when I talk about college is like when I got to UVA, and again, this goes back to Jersey, like my club team, my New Jersey club team was called Pasco, Passaic County. We practiced behind a prison, like no joke, behind a prison. And like if there was grass even like 2 or 3 months out of the year, it was a blessing. It was just dirt, mud, rocks, whatever. When I got to UVA, I mean, I had never seen fields like this in my life. And I'll never forget like being at training and hearing these other kids who were coming from like with all these resumes of U17, U20 and this, that. And they're like, grass is a bit brown today or like stuff like that. And I'm like, are you kidding me, man? And that's when I just kind of realized, I was like, you know what? Like we have a different mentality,
Yeah, you're cut from a different cloth.
Yeah. But it's one of those that you very much embrace where like, even when you get onto the field, you're like, I'm ready to play in mud, through rocks, whatever. And so I don't care about like a bad pass or a bad touch or a bad call. Like this is going to be a fight. And I realized then when I was at UVA of like, man, all these kids that I was intimidated by with like long resumes and awards and everything, like really doesn't mean anything. Because once you get out there, if you're not willing to fight me, then like I'm going to come out on top. So
yeah, that
helped just the mental side in getting through that.
No, you definitely are a competitor. We'll touch a little more on that. You had your good year in terms of winning everything you could win. Your junior year, you decided to leave early. You're an elite class in terms of being a first-round draft pick in the MLS Super Draft. Meant a lot more, I think, back then. Not to take anything away from the process now, but I definitely think that there was a lot more value on that when you did it. You get drafted to DC where Ray Hudson's the coach. I don't want to not let you talk about being drafted first, but I found a story about you that I really liked. It was more about your dad, that Ray Hudson played in a game in Fort Lauderdale where your dad was attacked by a fan for his being who he was. Is that the best way?
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to like knowing your roots and your history. So my family is Armenian. We are Christian Armenians. And to understand my dad's story, you have to understand the history of the Armenian people, which dates back to the genocide of 1915, where Turkey essentially massacred 1.5 million Armenians and millions more were displaced. So it's common nowadays that anytime even I meet an Armenian, the first question you ask is, okay, you're Armenian, but from where? Because Armenians were forced to relocate to other places, of course, unless they were killed. So both my parents are Armenians, and they both, their parents or grandparents were forced to relocate to Iran. So Iran was one of the countries that was actually receptive to Christian Armenians in terms of giving them jobs and letting them stay there without, them being at risk. So both of my parents, Christian Armenians, growing up in Tehran, which is obviously a Muslim country. And my dad's story is unbelievable because he essentially beat all odds by being a Christian Armenian and rising through the ranks to be one of the top players on the Iranian national team and playing for the biggest club in Iran, which was Taj at the time. So my dad became like a folk hero in Iran and more so just for like the working class, because he was a guy that was not supposed to be afforded those opportunities, but because he was able to just earn himself those opportunities where they couldn't not pick him for the team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when he made the national team, played in the World Cup, and then was, made a name for himself playing for Iran, then it was like Iranian defender Untitled Eskandarian. So everywhere he went after that, or every press clipping was Iranian player. So at that time, 1978, 1979, is when the hostage crisis came down. There was like a revolution, all that stuff. I think the movie Argo does like a really good job covering it. But when that Iran hostage crisis happened, my dad was now playing for the Cosmos, and like in the pregame manual or whatever, he's listed as like defender from Iran. So with tensions being high between the US and Iran at that time, there was a crazy, I think like Vietnam War veteran military guy who was in the stands in Fort Lauderdale, and he had come in with a knife, and his plan was to attack and try to kill my dad as a way of like revenge for the hostage crisis that was happening in Iran. So yeah, the guy jumped onto the field at the end of the game. And I think as my dad tells it, like he kind of crept up and I think it was Giorgio Chinalia who saw the guy and actually went and like tackled him before he kind of got to my dad. And then all the players kind of, restrained him, and he was taken off the field and I think arrested afterward. But yeah, crazy time. And actually my dad has a great like scrapbook, and, my dad didn't speak barely any English at that time. And his great quote, I think in like the New York Times or something, was in Iran, I'm considered Armenian. And so I was like discriminated against. And now I come to America and I'm considered Iranian, and now I'm like hated. So he's like, no matter where I go, I can't win. that was his line.
Well, I guess, I mean, that's a amazing story. And I don't think it's a great story in terms of the outcome and why it happened. But, you're a big family guy, and you've talked about your dad's role and your development and growing up. I mean, that's a huge lesson, right? For a father. I mean, did you know about did you learn about some of these crazy stories that he had? And if so, what was the message that he, talked to you about basically being hated by people for who you are?
Yeah. My dad is a special human being, man. I've never met a more humble, genuine person than my dad, and I wish more of it spilled onto me, because I think I'm missing some of those traits. But oddly enough, my dad never talked about any of it ever. My dad's very private, personal, and it was always other people that would bring stuff up, and I'd be like, "What are they talking about?" And then I'd have to kind of ask my dad, and he would kind of give me just roundabout stories, but I learned so much more about my dad through others, which I think says a lot about his own character. Like, he's never one to ever speak about his accomplishments or anything. You would never know that he was this amazing player, because he just has such a great heart, and he's so humble. And I don't think his career defines who he is. You know what I mean? So I think he likes to be defined by how he treats people. So yeah, oddly enough, I learned most of these stories through other people, and then just going through a scrapbook that like my mom made of my dad when he was playing. But like I said, a lot of it though relates back to life. And I think there is a lot of synergy between trying to make it as a soccer player and all the emotions you go through, being on a team or being a pro athlete, and just relating that to normal day life. So that's where, a lot of the lessons came from.
Awesome. Well, I didn't mean to go off, get you going too far down, down that path, but let's circle back to, I said you got drafted by Ray Hudson. Let's talk about a forgettable first game. Tell the people that don't know, you're amped up. You're the first draft pick. You want to go in there. You've talked about how you've always want to go in and make an impact. Tell me about the first game that you ever played in MLS.
Yeah, so my MLS debut, I I just remember that my parents drove down from Jersey to DC. I had a bunch of my friends from UVA who came down, and I knew I was going to play. I knew I was going to come off the bench, and I came in, I think like 60th minute or something like that. And as you referred to, I don't really remember anything after that, because shortly after I came on, I went in for a cross that was sent in the box, and I collided with Carlos Bocanegra and my own teammate Bobby Convey, who like accidentally undercut me. So I flipped over, landed straight on my head like a spear. Really lucky that I didn't break my neck and be paralyzed, but I ended up getting a pretty serious concussion, which gave me like amnesia for about 4 hours or so afterward, where I don't remember anything. I wasn't there. I don't even know how I was functioning, if I'm being totally honest. And then, you see on video that I'm like stumbling, staggering, my eyes are like a little crossed. And somehow I also was allowed to stay in the match. So I stay in the match for another 5 minutes or so. And I believe it was Carlos Bocanegra who was like, "Hey man, are you okay?" And apparently I start like cursing at him. And then he's like, "Do you know where you are?" And I say, "San Francisco." And we're obviously in DC. And he starts motioning to my team of like, "Hey man, like, I don't think this kid's okay." And I somehow jog over to half field and like sit down Indian style. And Goody, our trainer, comes out and they're like, "You got to come out of the game." So they take me out. I don't recognize my parents after the game. Apparently I had all these conversations. I don't remember anything. I was just like a blank face. And then hours later, when I was in the hospital, it felt like somebody just like clapped in front of my face. And all of a sudden I just remember coming to and being like, "Why are we in the hospital?" And I remember that my parents were there and some of my friends, and they were like talking as if I wasn't there. You know what I mean? They're like, "Yeah, he's not doing okay." And I'm like, I'm here. Like, why are you not talking at me? And I kept on asking, like, "Why are we here? Why are we here?" And no one was answering me. And when I looked around, I saw my parents were there, my friends were there, and I was like, "My brother's not here." And I'm like, "What happened to my brother?" So I started freaking out in the hospital, like, why won't anyone tell me what happened to my brother? And finally the doctors come out, Dr. Nunziato, which comes out and he's like, "Alecko, we're here for you. You hit your head in the game." And I'm like, "What?" And so that was my MLS debut.
Well, it's a brutal to watch. I know you don't like to watch it. That's unfortunate. I don't mean to laugh when you say you sat Indian style, but it just seems something like little Alecko would do, like child Alecko. He's gonna go sit in timeout in the middle of the field. But let's fast forward. It wasn't that's not a great start to your first year. Your first year wasn't necessarily you didn't have as much success as you had at previous, especially college your first year, but you get a coaching change at some point your next year, right? Peter comes in about a couple, 10 games into the season or something like that.
No, right in the offseason. In the offseason, Ray was hired, and then Peter got hired just right before the season.
Okay, so Peter comes in, and I mean, I think you and I both love that guy more than most, but he really kind of set you up for a lot of success going into the 2004 season. Just talk a little bit about that 2004 season. You don't got to go too far in it. I know you were an all-star. You scored 4 goals in the playoffs, 2 in the final. Just a hell of a year. But just talk to me about that first year to the second year and why you were able to find so much success.
Yeah, just mentality. I think there were, that rookie year was really, really frustrating for a variety of reasons, just trying to find your way. And I think we had a struggling team, and the culture of the team wasn't all that great. And I think, and Ray kind of would admit that at the time he wasn't really into playing young players. Like he was, I remember when he called me to his office and it's kind of weird that a coach asked me, he was like, how old are you? Which I'm like, my coach should know how old I am. But I was like, I'm 20. And he's like, you have plenty of time.
Don't want to hear that.
And yeah, in my head, I'm like, I didn't like leave school early to go pro to just like have, sit on the bench. But and it was just a bunch of us. Brian Carroll as well was another guy who like didn't play a single minute that rookie year. But yeah, it was really, really tough, but I learned a lot. And again, that chip on the shoulder kind of gets a little deeper where you're like, okay, I can't take this for granted because, it's not fun to not be able to play. So that next year, Peter was a breath of fresh air in that, as soon as he took over in preseason, I'll never forget where he's like, I don't care what your name is on the back of your shirt. I don't care what your statistics say. I don't care what your like accolades are or history or whatever. Like, I'm new here. You're all new here. And you're going to prove on the field who deserves to play. And when I heard that, my, ears perked up where I was like, this is what I thrive in, right? Make it a fight. Make it a fight where I have to earn myself. And it's not about like, oh, this guy's a veteran or this guy, makes more money or anything like that. So Peter, and as you know very well, he purposely makes practice incredibly competitive to see who is willing to fight and who isn't. And yeah, when that shift happened, I think the entire culture of our club changed. And I think as a result, you saw a lot of the same players, if I'm being honest, from 03 that carried over to 04, obviously with the two major additions in Jaime and Christian later in the year. But a lot of the same guys who were kind of considered busts, who now all of a sudden were like winners, and I think we owe a lot of it to Peter. Yeah.
And, Peter, for me, I got some stuff I want to talk about if we have time, with him in general. But, I loved him. For those that don't know, Alecko does an incredible Peter Novak impression. So much so that if Peter was in a bad mood and sometimes he thought it was funny, and meaning in post 9/11 America, Alecko would sometimes convince the people on the airplane to let him do his Peter Novak impression on the PA system, which is fascinating to me just in and of itself. But if we would do that on the road and we would lose, he would blame Alecko for the loss. And if he did it and we won, then he would let him do it on the way back home. So, Peter has a special place in my heart. I know he does in yours. But we did mention that year, heck of a year, all-star. I know I already said it. The goals, I think, depending on when this airs, is kind of the anniversary of that championship. I call it the hand of Jesus goal. It's not you're not a God. Jesus is probably a little over the top too, but I just love that Jimmy Conrad still gets mad about it with a poor clearance that led to you scoring 2 goals in 4 minutes. And your MLS Cup winner, MLS Cup MVP.
That's right. Yeah.
I think that's just incredible. And then of course the next year you get a cooler come in the name of Bobby Boswell to kind of cool the team off. And then we became friends. We were friends off the field. At least I don't even know if we were friends. You just lived in Georgetown and I was always there drinking.
We were brothers, buddy. We were brothers. We're more than friends, man. More than friends. As we know, the bond between teammates is pretty strong. But you share stuff that even your own family, will never even know about. So
yeah,
we were brothers, man.
Well, Alecko introduced me to girls I shouldn't have dated, and I'm pretty sure he stole a girl from me, but we don't have to get into that. We were roommates on the road though. And this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite Peter stories. We played in LA, and the night before the game, and I have some beef with you on this. Alecko had his lacrosse buddies. UVA is a big lacrosse.
No.
Stop. Alecko had his lacrosse buddies in town, and they were staying in the same hotel. They're professional lacrosse players. And literally, I go to bed early that night. I sleep with all my clothes on because I fell asleep reading. And I don't even drink coffee, but there was like a hot chocolate or something. And in the middle of the night, we're sleeping. and we hear a bang on our door, and I open
You
the
hear
door.
a bang on the door. I was out.
Yeah, you had one eye open, It's Peter Novak, right? And he's looking at me, and I'm dressed up, right? So of course, not a good sign. And he's like, "Oh, I knew it. He's cussing at me. He's like, you've been out drinking." And I was like, "Peter, I haven't been drinking. I've been here in the room all night." And he's like, "No, I heard you and Alecko come in." And I was like, "No, Peter, like we were not out drinking." And he's like, "Well, why are you dressed up?" I was like, I fell asleep reading." And he's like, "Reading? You don't know how to read?" And he's like pissed off. And I'm like, "What the heck, man? Like, I didn't do it." And then he's yelling at you. "You're sleeping." Like, "I know you're not sleeping, whatever." And he's like, "We're going to deal with this in the morning." And he leaves.
So wait. Can I give my version?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you were out, and I think that you came back and woke him up on the way into the room, and I took the fall for this.
I'm gonna give you my version, and then you can continue from where you stopped. So my version of it, I have a lot of family in LA, a lot of Armenians in LA. I have a lot of love for LA. So we're on an LA trip. Peter knows I'm gonna go see my family. So he sees me leave the hotel to go meet with my cousins to go out to dinner. But we had a 11 p.m. curfew. I came back 11:30, and I was like, ugh. Came through the lobby. I was like, I'm probably in trouble, but thankfully no one was there that I knew of anyway. Came back to the room. I'm like, perfect. Came back a little late, but we're good. I came back into the room, and what do I see? Bobby Boswell with all the lights on, asleep in his bed, with his jeans on and a button down and a book on his chest. And I'm like, dude, like, is this a joke, or like, are you playing a trick on me? What's going on? And he's out. Bobby's out. So I'm like, what? Wow. I mean, it must have been his first time reading a book. Killed him, So I'll never forget this. Being the roommate that I am, I tucked you in. I pulled the blanket out. I put a blanket over you. I moved the book to the side. I cut out the lights, and I went to bed. I went to bed hard, and I was out. I woke up the next morning, and I remember looking over to you, and I'm like, dude, Peter, I have 2 missed calls from Peter at like 3:30 a.m. And you were like, are you serious right now? I'm like, yeah. Like, do you think Peter was out, or what, like, what's this all about? And you just looked at me like, are you serious? Were you out? I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? I'm like, I came home and you were asleep. Like, what are you talking? And you're like, dude, Peter banged on our door at 3:30 in the morning. And you told me that story, and I was completely oblivious to all of it. And then I'll let you continue.
Well, no, he was crazy. He made me breathe into his mouth. He said and for those that don't know, Alecko used to always get a kick at Peter would have us do crazy stuff, and Alecko would say, I'm not doing it. But like, he always caught me. Like, I remember once Peter was like, hey, can you help me shave my back in the locker room? And you were like, you walked out of the shower and you were just appalled that I would do something like that. And I was like, what, dude? It's not a big deal. Peter had me breathe in his face. He's like, breathe in because I can smell the alcohol. And I was like, it's not alcohol, Peter. It's hot chocolate, and I haven't brushed my teeth. And then he's like, oh, you are effing lying to me. And I was like, so I just literally, your head coach, 3:30 in the morning, I'm just looking down at this little guy, and I'm going, like, right in his face. And he was like, you are lying. You're lying. And then he left. And then the next day we played. I never forget. I was so mad after the game. I was like, Peter, I'm appalled that you think I would do that. And he told me, like, oh, I had a dream, and you and Alecko were out, and then I got up to smoke a cigarette, and I looked at the room list, and I'm like, this is not the dream.
And he heard the lacrosse guys going crazy,
yeah.
and he thought.
So, but then he was like, my friend, it's okay, no big deal. And I was like, it was a big deal to me. Yeah. But anyway.
Wait, you forgot about this, because see, my memory is better than yours. If you remember, because you told me about all this. And then you were like, dude, we might not start. And I'm like, F that. Like, we didn't do anything wrong. I was in bed, like, granted 11:30, but like, we didn't do anything wrong. And you're like, I'm just telling you, man, Peter was pissed. He maybe breathed in his face, like all this stuff. And so we went to the pregame meal thinking like, dude, are we going to be in the lineup or not? And I remember he did the lineup, and he was eyeballing us the entire like meal. I could just see him like Pitbull, like eyeballing, trying to like get a reaction or like a confession or something. So he puts us in the lineup. I don't know if I even told you this, but obviously I like to play a lot of jokes. So I waited until everyone was out of the room and I was the last one, right? And everyone else was out. And just the coaches stayed because the coaches then had their like little coaches meeting. So I waited until everyone left the room and I went to the coaches table and I was like, Peter, I saw my name on the lineup, but to be honest with you, I'm pretty hungover. I don't know if I can start. And he goes, I knew it. I knew it. And I was like, I'm just messing with you, man. Like, what are you, crazy? You think me and Bobby would like go out the night before a game? Like, you think we're amateurs here? Like, what's going on? And he's like, be honest with me. Be honest with me. Tell me if you went out. I'm like, Peter, I swear on my life, I didn't go out. You want me to call my cousin right now? Like, we didn't go out. I went to dinner and I came back. And he's like, why was Bobby in his clothes? I'm like, I don't know about Bobby. I don't know why Bobby was in his clothes, but he was asleep when I got home. So anyway, it all cleared up and we worked out. But it was.
No, I love Peter. He had some moments, man, that were just awesome. Looking back on it, that people just don't realize what goes on behind the scenes.
Man. He's a mad genius. So like, you can't expect him to be totally normal.
No, he's great. All right, well, let's 2005. You have another concussion, a big collision with Matt Reese. I'll never forget, my mother ran into him in a hotel and told him she didn't appreciate him doing that to you. So shout out to Mama Boswell for sticking up for you.
Thank you.
But then let's fast forward. I don't want to get too hung up on the concussions. I know we'll talk about that at the end. Back in 2006, you come back with a bang. You score a lot of goals. You're another all-star season. You score this game right here, Real Madrid in Seattle. I think that was probably the biggest crowd I've ever played in front of at that point, maybe ever. We won the Supporters Shield. You have probably the greatest goal celebration in the history of MLS with the Red Bull. Everyone, I'm sure if they know your name, they know that celebration. But talk to me a little bit about what you're thinking as before you end up getting traded to Toronto.
Yeah. Well, when I went through that concussion in 2005, everything got put in perspective where I didn't know if I would ever play again. So when I came back in 2006, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't take it for granted and I would, take every goal that I scored like it was my last. So I tried to have more fun, be more creative with celebrations and things like that, because in the back of my head, I'm like, if I get hit in the head one more time, I don't know if I'm going to be a vegetable or be okay. Like, I have no idea. So I try to, and I also didn't want to change how I played, right? Because I was always aggressive and that's what I had fun. Like there were moments there where I was like, oh, can I be cautious? And I was like, I can't. Like, if I have to be cautious, then I'm not being me. So I wanted to keep playing the same way that I did and just have as much fun as I could. Like you said, we had an amazing year, amazing team, and unfortunately fell short in the playoffs. But yeah, that offseason, there were just massive wholesale changes for DC. I think it was like 6 or 7 of us that got traded. And the way my trade went down was really tough because as you mentioned, I had a great relationship with Peter, and I knew that Peter respected, my value to the team. And my agent that offseason was telling me like, hey, New York is trying to get you and just want to give you a heads up that I think Bruce had just taken over at New York, and they were like, Bruce is trying to work out a deal to bring you from DC. And I was like, look, tell Bruce that I'm happy in DC. But I was like, at the same time, if I am going to go somewhere, like I'd love to go to New York. So my agent puts in a call to, I'll just say, the leadership at DC United at the time. And my agent calls me back and he's like, I don't know how to tell you this, but like, you've already been traded. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, where? And he goes, Kansas City. I'm like, what? And so I'm like, how is this possible? And then I get really upset because then I'm like, how did Peter not even have like the nerve to call me and give me a heads up? So I left a really nasty voicemail for Peter, and later, Kurt Onalfo was the coach in KC. He called me and he's like, "Hey, listen, I want to, if I'm going to trade for you, I want to make sure you're committed to the project." And I was like, "Kurt, to be honest with you, I'm happy in DC and I'd rather stay. So, you know, I have a lot of respect for you and think you're going to do great, but I'd prefer to stay in DC." And Kurt was like, "I only want players that want to be here. So like trades off." I'm like, "Great." Then my agent calls back and is like, "Now they've agreed to trade you to Toronto." And I'm like, "What's going on?" So talk to Mo Johnston, and he was like, "Same thing. I only want players that want to be here." And then somehow the trade went through. I found out in the media, and I called Mo, like, "I thought you just wanted players that are going to be here." He's like, "I figured I'll convince you that you want to be here." So I'm livid because at this point, I've not heard from anyone at DC. I've not heard from Peter, and they're just media. Like, it's in the media, and like Stephen Goff is calling me like, "Can I get a quote from like you being traded?" And I'm like, and here's the craziest part. Here's the craziest part. Right before it gets out in the public to the media, I already know that I've been traded, right? But Mark Simpson, our goalie coach, calls me and he's like, "Hey, just want to let you know we're going to have voluntary training sessions starting next week." And I'm like, "Simo, I'm pretty sure you just traded me." And he's like, "No, Alecko, like there are a lot of rumors. Clubs always call about a lot of our players and all this stuff." And I'm like so confused, just sitting in Jersey, like, what is going on? And then it's like 5 days later, Simo calls me back and he's like, "I'm really sorry, man. Like, we had no idea, but yeah, you did get traded." And then the whole time, like, what happened to Peter? Then news comes out that Peter quit and became the national team assistant coach. So he then calls me back and is like, "If you ever leave me a voicemail like that again, I'll kill you." And then it's like a month later that Tommy gets announced as the new head coach. And Tommy calls me and he's like, "Hey, I just found out no one from the club ever called you to inform you that you've been officially traded. So I know you know this already, but I wanted to, like, just out of respect, let you know, like, thank you for all you've done. And just know that this decision was not mine. It was done before I took the job." I'm like, "Okay."
Did you say thank you?
No, I let out a nice
Jersey strong.
a nice Jersey salute, and then told them they'd regret it and hung up.
All right. Well, I thought about asking about Tommy, the new regime, but I don't really want to go down that road. And I don't want to spend too much time on Toronto. You're only there for a little while. You get traded to Salt Lake. You weren't really there in Salt Lake. You know, you do play some, but you know, your goal scoring record, granted the quality of the teams is it's hard to be the unicorn in terms of producing on your own. But then you end up where everyone wants to end up in Chivas. That's a joke. But you're there and you get, you know, I remember you always had scars. I know you had some hernias and I think you had an adductor injury there.
Yeah.
So you miss all but 8 games and you still tied for the team lead in goals.
Yeah.
With this 5 goals. So I feel like you're making some progress. You're ready to come back. And then you get transferred to the Galaxy. I'd imagine that's just like you roll your locker down the hall into another room.
Yep.
Yeah, something
Exactly.
along those lines. And you had to have been stoked about being a member of the Galaxy.
Yeah, no, it was, you know, you kind of touched on it, but I was on 4 teams in 12 months. It was crazy. It was really, really tough, mentally as well. Just with, like, I never unpacked my bags. You know, even when I was at Salt Lake, I was living with Nicky Raimondo in his basement. In Toronto, I was like on Maurice Adu's couch half the time. So you just never kind of get that comfort level. And that definitely affected my play and my mindset. And then, like you said, I had some injuries at Chivas, which made me get another surgery and missed a lot of time. But I always knew I had the ability when I was healthy and just like needed to find my way within the team. And I think at Chivas, I showed that I could still play. And then when I was traded to the Galaxy, it was like match made in heaven, perfect fit, where I finally had that same feeling that I had in DC, like in 06 and 04, where I was like, I have a great supporting cast around me where I could just focus on what I do best. And it's not about like carrying a team, like you said, or anything like that. And so many great players there with Beckham and Landon and Edson Buttle and Mike McGee. And it was just a pleasure to like show up to training every day. Jovan Kirovsky. I think I played 3 games and had 2 goals. Felt like I was back to back to the level where I was like, I should score in every game with these guys around me. And then unfortunately played a friendly match against AC Milan and took a really bad Thiago Silva clearance off the dome. And that was it.
Yeah. And, at that point, that was your 4th, is that your 4th big concussion? I mean, I know we don't really keep track, but I have in my notes, so I don't want to forget the coolest stat that you have. I think it fits you perfectly. We talk about you being a competitor. The Chivas games, even though you only played 8 games, you played all 3 of your previous teams and you scored against all 3 of your previous teams. That has to be the greatest stat. And that's an Esky stat. If there ever was an Esky stat, that, you know what, it's like, you're going to trade me, like I'm going to make you pay. I mean, is that how you felt when you scored?
100%. You don't forget that stuff. And, I think unfortunately in the business of soccer, sometimes maybe people forget the impact that it has on the human. Right. And I was really, really, really hurt with a lot of the way a lot of those deals went down, because as you know, when we were in DC, that was family. Like we knew everyone in the offices, we knew the interns, we knew the volunteers, we knew the mascot, we knew the fans. Like I think you and I alone, Bobby, were responsible for filling up half of that stadium just by like marketing within like the streets of DC, of convincing people, like cool people, to come to matches. So I had a lot of, invested emotion in DC and in winning the championship, and to kind of see how like just a business decision was made, the lack of communication and lack of, I would say, respect even with the departures, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And it shifted my entire, like the way I just viewed professional soccer and being on a team and all that stuff. So when the opportunity came to then play against those teams, I made sure my groin was healed up for that one. And I don't care if I had a bunch of torn muscles, like there was nothing that was going to stop me from playing and scoring in those games.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that stat when I was looking at it. But so you talked about, getting kicked in the head again, or taking a ball off the head, and that kind of re-energized the concussions in your head and kind of the talk on what should you do. I know. By
the way, don't ever say re-energize the concussions in your head ever again. That's probably the worst medical explanation I've ever heard in my life.
Well, you know me, my head is like, I'm so stupid in terms of, I've been hit in the head so much. I don't have concussions, but just constant beating that, I make up words, I make up sayings, I try them out, I'm not even sure the Pilgrims killed turkeys, but I used it in the opening and I'm going to stick with it. So, but it really, what I want to get to is I know Ross Pauley and David Beckham reached out to you to kind of maybe talk to you about hanging them up. You've done a ton of work. You've been a keynote speaker, not just for the youth, but also for neuroscience. You've wrote a wonderful article for the Players Tribune. You've talked a lot about the understanding of concussions. This is not something that's going to go away. I know people get tired of Taylor Twellman talking about it, but it's a reality now. And as we learn more, we realize we don't know a lot. So just talk to me about, having been one of the pioneers, unfortunately, in that field. What are you looking at going forward, and what's the message, and what's your role in that message?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up because it is such an important topic, and I'm really proud of the progress that's been made in regards to raising awareness about concussions and the technical and medical advancements that have come of it. Yeah, it's not fun to be known as like one of the first guys to ever be forced to retire because of it. But, once I was able to kind of go through my own grieving process and trying to, reinvent myself and figure out what my identity is, then you start to realize like, man, I don't want anyone else to have to go through what I just went through. And it's a responsibility of mine to ensure that no kid has to go through that. So by speaking out about it and trying to educate as many people as possible and fill them in on the realities of how it works, because you were in the locker room with me and I'm sure you were part of it as well. When I was out like in DC, there was a little bit of like, come on, man, like we need you, try to get back in there. Like, how bad is it really? Like, I still see you kind of laughing or like, hanging out with the guys, because it's an invisible injury and there's no scar, there's no cut, there's no blood that someone could point at and be like, ooh, yeah, you should sit out. You look like you're fine.
And Peter's remedy was all the guys that are injured just run, right? I mean,
yeah, or motivate you by like making your life as an injured person. If that's miserable, he thought it would motivate you to come back quicker.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of his tactic at first. But I don't know if you remember this, Bobby, but you were on the team. It was like middle of the summer. I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't even run. I couldn't jog. Couldn't do anything. And I remember I asked Cisco, our equipment manager at the time, for every piece of gear that he had. And I was wearing like 10 layers of like sweatshirts.
You're cold, right?
What's that?
Go ahead.
It was in the middle of the summer and I was just walking around the field because I wanted to sweat, like just to like stay in shape. And I remember you guys were laughing, like, look at this guy, he's just being a clown. Like, and I was like, no, like I can't run. I can't do anything. Like I want to be able to sweat. And I remember Peter pulled me aside and he's like, what are you doing? And I told him, I was like, look, man, like I can't do anything else. Like you don't know how bad I want to be out there. Like, and I think that's when it finally clicked on him, because a few months had passed and he was like, look, I think you should go home. And he sent me home to Jersey. And that's when I saw the human side of Peter, where he was like, okay, this isn't something that I need to like motivate him more. This is real. And actually he needs to get away. So yeah, he sent me home and I didn't play the rest of that entire season. But the whole point of it is it's really tough, and it's a thin line, because for some people, and everyone's made up differently, but when you're a big piece of your identity is taken away from you, it's super damaging to your entire mental makeup. And fortunately, I had a strong support system, and I had a belief that I would overcome. But for some people, that consumes them. And now you see people taking their own life, people who are abusive with their own, friends and family, or, are dealing with these demons that they can't overcome. It's really, really sad. So I went through that after my last one, where at 27 years old, I'm playing with David Beckham, scored 2 goals in 3 games. And all of a sudden at the, flick of one header, or
clap, like you said,
all of a sudden now it's like you're unemployed, you can't work out, you get headaches, you can't exert yourself. I couldn't be out in the sun. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get my heart rate up. And now it's like, what is my life? And I went through a difficult, I would say 1.5 years, where I truly had to go back to the basics and try to figure out, try to really look in the mirror and say, who am I? Like, what purpose do I have on this planet? Went back to the drawing board.
Well, I want to talk about, that when you come out of that and how you end up back on the East Coast. But any podcast interview with Alecko, I don't want to talk about it. I just had to mention he went on a date with Kim Kardashian when he lived in LA. That story is out there. I encourage you to go look at it if that floats your boat. And he also was subbed off for Freddie Adu. Those are two things that everyone always talks about with Alecko. That's not how I see it at all. Other than I saw the giggly guy on the date that everyone thought was nervous, and I said he's not nervous. He's laughing at his own jokes. But let's fast forward. So you talk about, hanging them up. You come back to UVA, and you became a doctor, right? Because you were in college for 11 years.
Correct. Exactly. I outlasted some of my professors even, which is a pretty phenomenal feat. But yeah, it's funny. When I left UVA, I made a promise to my mom. I said, Mom, I know soccer has been my thing, but I promise you I will get my degree from UVA. So even when I was in the league, I tried to continue taking classes on the side. You remember, because you would tag along for the girls, but I would go to American University to take some classes when I was in DC.
Monday night bowling.
Right. That's right. And then when I was in LA, I took classes at El Camino College, actually. And I was always kind of chipping away. And then when it all came to an end and the rug got pulled from under me and I had to retire, and I was thinking about next logical steps, I was like, you know what? Before I get into something else, I need to go back and finish my degree. So I went back to UVA, and it was tough because I was living in paradise. I was in Hermosa Beach, like steps from the ocean, amazing life. But I was like, I wasn't fulfilled, and I had to get away from soccer because it was really tough being in LA where all my friends were my teammates and not being able to be in the locker room, not being able to share those experiences on the field. It was really tough. So I had to just get away from it all. Went back to Charlottesville and finished my last year and a half. Got my degree and then just started to think about next steps. And from there, I had a familiar voice that called me, which was Peter Novak, who at that time was the head coach at Philadelphia Union. And at first he called me, he's like, I want you to be my assistant coach. And I'm like, no. I was like, I don't really want to go into coaching right now. Like I'm interested in other parts of the game. And we had a good chat about it. And then he called me a few months later and he's like, hey, I think we have a different role that you might be interested in. And I got hired as the youth technical director of the Philadelphia Union.
Yep. And I think did you coach a little at UVA while you were doing your studies?
Yeah. So when I was at UVA, I didn't tell anyone that I went back to UVA. Like I was stealth. I didn't want anyone to know. I just wanted to be alone. And when I went back to UVA, I was oddly enough in a class, and one of the kids that was on the men's soccer team was in my class, and he kind of keeps on doing these double takes. And I'm like, is this kid just making fun of me because I'm old and he knows I shouldn't be in school? And he keeps on looking at me. And actually the kid, he's a pro right now. His name's Kobe Span. He plays out in Sweden. And he kind of comes up to me after class. He's like, hey man, you the guy that played for DC United? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God, I used to watch you when I was a kid and all this stuff. And he's like, aren't you still playing? And I was like, no, I just had to retire because of concussions. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. Then the next class, he comes and he's like, hey, can you come to my game and let me know if you think I'm good? And I was like, sure, man, I'll come to your game. So I went and watched the game. And then he started telling the other guys on the team. They told the coach, and the coach is like, why didn't you tell me I'm here, that you're here? We'd love to have you come to training and all that stuff. So I wanted nothing to do with coaching. But when I started talking to these kids, you start to realize, and Bobby, maybe you feel it now, but once you're out of the game, you start to reminisce about all the good things that you did, but also all the mistakes that you made and how things could have maybe gone differently as well. And I found myself seeing all these eager kids in college who are just begging for an opportunity to be a pro. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to offer and teach. So I really, really love, like those kids are a big reason I overcome what I was going through with my concussions, because I was in a dark place feeling sorry for myself of like losing my identity. And those kids pulled it out of me to be like, damn, I have a lot to offer. I have a lot to like teach, and I could help. If I could help even one kid not make the mistakes that I made, then it's all worth it. So totally, grateful for that opportunity, and grateful for those guys to be so receptive of me being a volunteer coach.
Yeah. So, I mean, you start there, you talk about you don't want to coach, but you end up with the academy in Philly. And then you end up with Gio Savarese. Did I say Savarese or Savarese?
Savarese.
Well, I hang out with the boxer Lou Savarese.
Okay.
So, and you don't get his name wrong because he'll just hit you in the head. So it's Gio Savarese.
You should correct him next time. See how that
I
works.
will. Yeah. I'll have a bloody lip because he doesn't know how hard he hits. But let's talk about full circle, man. I know you're a big believer in the full circle, in life, and, your dad played for the Cosmos, and then, it's maybe a different role, but you get to go back and be a coach, and, you had a lot of success while you were there. So, I mean, what did that mean to you, to go back to the club where your father was a legend?
Yeah, it was great. It just kind of all came together where I was in Philly at the time, and then things ended in Philly, and I was at a point where, my parents were obviously getting a little bit older, and you start to realize, like, man, I've missed a lot of moments in my life because of the game, and it was like my cousins and this and that, like graduations, weddings, all these different things that I could just never made it to. And something happened. I forget what it was. So it was something ordinary, but I was like, man, this is pretty crappy to like always miss out on all these things. And I was like, I need to go home, and I need to find a job that's closer to home. And when I decided that, Gio ends up calling me, tells me about the Cosmos project. And he's like, look, like there's no other person in the game that like this job is catered for than you, like with your history and the roots, and obviously being from the area. He's like, we have to bring you in. So when he hired me, it was me, him, a gentleman named Jack Gaeta, who was like the team operations, and one player, which was Carlos Mendez. That was it. So we literally built that club from scratch, to hiring everyone, to picking jerseys, to sponsors, to fundraising, and then just building out the entire roster. So that experience was invaluable in terms of learning the entire back end of what it takes to build a club, and to your point, what it takes to build a successful club. And what really drew me to the project, and we talked a little bit about like the bad taste that I know I had in my mouth, maybe you've had as well with certain teams that we've been on. What we made sure with the Cosmos, we were all former players, between myself, Gio, Carlos, Yamosa, Memo Valencia was the goalie coach, even Jack was a former player. We all knew like what success looks like and feels like. And so we try to make sure that even with the Cosmos, it was very family oriented, and that it was more than just a team that you're playing for. It's very much like a passion and a brotherhood and relationships that I think, we'll carry for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, no. And I love that group. I know you root for them now in Portland. They've done some great things there. You were the MPSL champions, I think, under your guidance alone, but then you had the NASL. Y'all won that 3 times. I think you had an undefeated season, which just talks about how dominant you were. Now you're the, I kind of talk about the coaching with, you're a player, you played around the league, then you end up going kind of the college route, and that you have some college coaching experience. Then you go into the academy system, then you go into the NASL / you can make a case that transitions into USL and some of these other, I don't call them lower leagues. I just call them different leagues in American soccer, which kind of gets you into this role where you've been around every aspect of the American game. played for the national team in Wales. I didn't mention that. You got a cap with the U.S. men's team. But talk to me about what your role is with MLS now as the director of player development, and what that means to you.
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, it's been a long journey, and especially post concussions, post playing career, I try to dip my feet into as many pools as possible to kind of get a taste of what I was interested and different parts of the industry. And like I said, with the Cosmos, even though I was coaching, since we weren't a huge club, a lot of us wore many different hats. And one of the things that I became passionate about was the work that was put in prior to stepping on the field. So everything off-season related with scouting and signing guys and just managing everything, building our roster enough that coaching actually was the easy part. It was more about finding the right fit and the right guys to be part of the project. So grateful for Gio to give me a green light to be involved in some of those deals. And when it came time for next steps, obviously Gio was fielding offers because of our success from different MLS clubs. At that same time, I had a meeting with the Commissioner Garber, and who would kind of check in with me once a year, just see how I was doing, which was really thoughtful of him. And we had a dinner where he was like, "Hey, what are your goals? What do you want to do?" And I started thinking more and more about it. And I'm like, I don't know if I just want to be a coach. I don't know if I want to live this life of that's every Saturday, every Friday, you're gone, you're on the road, your life is just on a schedule. And I'm like, I'm kind of passionate about this other side of things. And the Commissioner mentioned look, we might have an opening. You should take a look. So I interviewed for a position in the player relations department, and I got the job. I had to break the news to Gio and leave him, but Gio was extremely supportive, and his words to me were like, I knew I was gonna have to let you go at some point because I know you have more to offer. So when I made the transition to the league office, again, just a whole new environment. Couldn't wear shorts and a jersey to work anymore. Had to buy some real clothes, and yeah, I was now surrounded by lawyers and accountants and all these different specialists in different fields, and that was great for me because I've learned so much in my years there. And currently, I'm almost in a dual role between player relations and player development. And to kind of give you the short version of it, it's basically worrying about everything that is off the field, meaning rosters, budgets, salary cap, rules, scouting, everything in regards to building a club, and that then relays into the product onto the field.
Yeah, and I know I've seen some of your work at the Rookie Symposium. I'm on the other side in terms of helping from the PA side, and you've got former players helping. I know I saw Johnny Wilson and Patrick Ianni there. So, still, I think everyone's trying to fight the good fight and help.
We're all on one side, man. We're all on one side.
Help grow the game to improve it. You're right. No, you're right. I'm not a wordsmith, or I'm not even sure that's a word either. But for those that don't know, I'm going to wrap it up here. Alecko is on social media. He put Alecko11 as his hashtag or his @ name, as opposed to the other Aleckos that and you follow. Good thing he put his number on there. But you can find him. If you do follow him, that he's been very vocal, especially lately. He brought it up earlier. He's always been someone that's focused on the Armenian genocide and bringing awareness to it. But for those that aren't familiar with world politics, there's been an Armenian Azeri conflict that's kind of taken the headlines, and he's been doing some really great things in terms of this jersey initiative that he's got going on. Can you tell the listeners what that is, and if people are looking to help or to learn more, kind of lead them in the right direction?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby, and definitely encourage people to do their own research about the situation in Armenia and the conflict with Azerbaijan and Turkey. Unfortunately, it's a situation where, because of corruption and resources and all sorts of other things, the message is not always portrayed accurately. So you have to do some digging. But yeah, there are a bunch of innocent Armenians that are suffering and being displaced, and we certainly feel like it has remnants of the genocide all over again. So we're doing everything that we can as Armenians in the diaspora to prevent that from happening, raise as much awareness as possible. And specifically for me, it's to raise funds that we can donate directly to these families that have lost everything overnight. So I naturally decided to reach out to the soccer community that, I feel like has always had a way of relating to the underdog and relating to, folks that don't have a voice. And the feedback that I've gotten has been incredible with collecting signed jerseys that we're then going to donate and signed jerseys that we're going to auction and then donate all the proceeds to those families. So I'm hoping to have it up on a website in the next couple of days. I'm working through how setting up an auction works right now and like tax implications and all that stuff. So figuring all that out, but in the coming days, we should have them all online. So feel free to follow me on social media, on Twitter or on Instagram at Alecko11. And I think it'll be really great for people to check it out. We've got some amazing names and jerseys that have been donated. Guys like Pele and Raul, legends of the sport, to young up-and-comers like Gio Reyna, Zach Steffen, Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie. Women's side as well, Megan Rapinoe, Rose Lavelle, Carly Lloyd. So yeah, really, really blessed to have the involvement of these legends and hoping we could raise money that'll help change a lot of lives.
Yeah, when I saw you're needing jerseys, or not really needing them, but collecting them, I was going to reach out, but then I realized that you were, collecting players that were good and famous. And
No. I'll take your jersey, brother. I'll take your jersey.
all right, well, I got one for you. But listen,
I'll combine it with mine, and it'll make one half decent player.
Well, that girl you set me up with, she cut my jersey in half and sewed it to a football jersey and went to Halloween as a cleat chaser. So thank you for introducing me to that wonderful
She was honest.
Yeah, she was honest. She was honest. Well, no, listen, this was definitely more fun for me than you because I got to reminisce on some of the old times. I appreciate you giving us some of your time. What an incredible underdog story that you like to sell, even though you scored 150 goals on your high school team and then 60 goals in college and then another 35 goals in the pros. But you're rewriting your book in terms of not just being a soccer player, and it's really fun to watch from afar. And once again, just thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, brother. And I'm extremely proud of you as well, man. I know you're doing an amazing thing by amplifying the voices of current and former players, and the work that you've done yourself and the path that you've carved has been inspirational to me, and I know to a lot of other guys. So keep doing your great work, and it's always an honor to be your friend and a brother.
All right, man. Well, there you go, folks. The one and only Alecko Eskandarian.
Love you, man.